Okay guys, here we go. I wanted to start off on the carpet this morning just like we do on a regular school day. We're going to start off with our book that I'm going to be reading to you on the carpet this week. We're going to start off in a new chapter book. We're going to do one, maybe two chapters a day depending on how long it takes once we get rolling. And I want to start off with here we go, Happy Monday, Happy Monday. I know you're at home probably in your pajamas. I'm at school, but I'm in my exercise workout clothes. So here we go. We're going to start right off like we would on the carpet. Boxcar, and more boxcar. Just show me the boxcar. And when I'm reading the smartboard slides to you from the classroom, I want you to be reading with me as you're watching at home. Here we go. We're going to start out with a little review. And we do this every morning on the carpet, and we're going to go to our continents. Let me hear you boom it out. Here we go. The continents. Continents. Do you know your continents? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia. Don't forget Australia. Don't forget Antarctica. Continents. Do you know your continents? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Arthur, do you know your continents? Unknown. And we are going to enjoy, we have plenty of time, we are going to enjoy, if I can get it rolling, the clip this morning. Here we go. You can sing along with the clip.
There are 7 continents in this song that we will sing. 7 continents in this world that we live in. Europe, Africa, North and South America. Europe, Africa, North and South America. Asia, Australia and Antarctica. Asia, Australia and Antarctica. There are 7 continents in this song that we will sing. The first is Europe with its Eiffel Tower, its London Bridge and its waddling mallard. Africa has rich jungle for miles, old pyramids and the river Nile. North America is very diverse, filled with national parks and colorful birds. In South America, there's a big rainforest filled with monkeys and flowers and many natural showers. Asia has great big pandas, dancing dragons, and tall pagodas. In Australia, there are cuddly koalas and an opera house that would knock your socks off. Antarctica has glaciers of ice. It is cold, there are penguins, and indeed it's white. There are 7 continents in this song that we will sing. 7 continents in this world that we live in. Europe, Africa, North and South America. Europe, Africa, North and South America. Asia, Australia and Antarctica. Asia, Australia and Antarctica. There are 7 continents in this song that we will sing. Europe, Africa, North and South America. Europe, Africa, North and South America. Asia, Australia and Antarctica. Asia, Australia and Antarctica.
Okay, we're going to move right on to our next continent song. We haven't done this one as much, but you should remember it. Continents lyrics, here we go. Boom it out with me. Continents, continents, do you know your continents? North, south, east, and west, all around the world. Asia, Africa, North and South America, Australia, Antarctica, and Europe too. And let's go over our continents up on the smart board. Repeat those with me. We have North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, Antarctica. Let's try those without the words. Here we go. North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, Antarctica. And I did want to put in a picture of the United States of America. And remember, this is our country, and we have a lot going on in our country this week. So let's look at, we're right here in North Carolina. Now, the new book I'm going to be sharing with you on the carpet today, I used to start with a chapter book written by Gertrude Chandler Warner called The Boxcar Children. Title, The Boxcar Children, author Gertrude Chandler Warner. Illustrator L. Kate Deal. Genre fiction, genre realistic fiction. Author's purpose to entertain. Now, the copyright date means when this book was printed or when this book was published. And this book is a very, very old book. It was published way back in 1942. And I have some pictures of the author, Gertrude Chandler Warner, or some photos. Gertrude Chandler Warner was actually a fourth grade teacher, and she had a problem as a fourth grade teacher. She was ready for her children to begin reading chapter books, but she had a hard time in the library finding good chapter books that her children were able to read and understand. So she got a really big idea. She decided that she would write a chapter book, and she wrote the first book in the series. There is a whole Boxcar Children series. She wrote the first book called The Boxcar Children. You know, when we start a new chapter book, I always like to start with the first book in the series, so as readers we can see how everything got started. So The Boxcar Children is the first book in Gertrude Chandler Warner's series. And you may be wondering what a boxcar is. A boxcar is a part of a train. So as we begin talking about the Boxcar Children, Gertrude Chandler Warner published the Boxcar Children way back in 1942. And after she published that book, it became such a popular chapter book that her readers begged her for more. So Gertrude Chandler Warner wrote many, many more books in the Boxcar Children series. The reason this is one of my favorite books is because when I was in fourth grade, my fourth grade teacher read this book to the class, and it became one of my favorites. And after I read the Boxcar Children, each week when I would go to the library, I would try to find another book by Gertrude Chandler Warner written in the Boxcar Children series. Then a few years ago, not so many years ago, another author, Patricia McLaughlin, she decided to write a prequel to the Boxcar Children. We're not going to start with the Boxcar Children. We're actually going to start with the Boxcar Children beginning. And this book was not published until the year 2012. In the Boxcar Children, published in 1942, there were four main characters. Henry, Jesse, Violet, and Benny are four homeless orphans. They have no parents and no place to call home. They find an old boxcar in the woods and turn it into a home. That's kind of a summary of the Boxcar Children, first book in the series written by Gertrude Chandler Warner. Then in 2012, Patricia McLaughlin wrote the prequel to the Boxcar Children, and it's called The Boxcar Children Beginning. A prequel is a book that comes before the original book that was in the series. So a sequel, we've already talked about this in first grade. A sequel is a book that comes after or a book that comes next. A prequel is actually a book that comes before. And it says, read the prequel, The Boxcar Children Beginning, to see how all of this got started. The prequel was published in 2012. Because as a reader, when I read The Boxcar Children or listened to my teacher read it for the first time, I wondered why Henry, Jesse, Violet, and Benny were homeless orphans. So we're going to start with the prequel so we can see how everything got started. And we're going to go right into the first chapter of our prequel today. And the title is The Boxcar Children Beginning, The Aldens of Fair Meadow Farm. This is a book that's going to take place on a farm. The author is Patricia McLaughlin, the illustrator Robert Dunn, genre realistic fiction, author's purpose to entertain, book jacket designer Tim Giselle, copyright date 2012, and this is the prequel to the Boxcar Children Mysteries. Now, because this is taking place on a farm, there is going to be a lot of action taking place on a farm. So I wanted you to hear that cow. I know you like those sound clips up on the smart board. And one of our main characters in the book is going to be a dog. So let me let you hear that dog make his sound. One more time. One more time. Now, as we're reading The Boxcar Children, one of the things we're going to be working on, and we would be working on this in reading groups if we were in school today. Since we're not in school today, this is something you can work on with your families when you do your reading groups at home. It's called summarizing. Now, we talked about this a lot in first grade. Summarizing, remember, is when we summarize as readers, we read a chapter or we read a book, and when we summarize or when we write a summary, we pick out the most important things, the most important events from the book or from the chapter. And this is a little song. You know, Miss Sheppard has a song or a poem for everything. This is a little song or a little poem that I wanted to share with you, and this is the Summarizing Hokey Pokey. Now, most of you know the tune of the Hokey Pokey, so I'm going to go right in. This time I want you just to listen. When I do it a second time, I want you to actually sing along or read along with me. This is the Summarizing Hokey Pokey. You put the big ideas in, you take the extras out, you put the essentials in, and you cross the repeats out. You do some summarizing and write the paragraph now. That's what it's all about, summarizing. Okay, your turn. Let's this time do it together. Summarizing Hokey Pokey, here we go. You put the big ideas in, you take the extras out, you put the essentials in, and you cross the repeats out. You do some summarizing and write the paragraph now. That's what it's all about, summarizing. Good job. I could hear you all the way at Walton Academy with that boom in your voice. Now we're going to go right into, if we were at school today, we would be ready to start Chapter 1 of The Boxcar Children Beginning. You know, when we read the first chapter in a chapter book, as readers, before we get started, we are thinking. As good readers, we're always thinking as we're reading, but we also think before we start reading. As we're thinking about making predictions. I wonder what The Boxcar Children Beginning is going to be about. Now, we've done this a lot in reading groups, where we start with our T1 and our P1. Now, I'm not going to ask you to write this in your notebook like we would do if we were in reading groups, but I'm expecting you to have your wide eyes, your big ears, and I'm expecting you to be doing that good out loud participating that we do when we're together in reading groups. T1 stands for the title of chapter 1, and we know the title in a chapter book gives us clues about the main idea of that chapter, or it gives us clues about what that chapter is going to be mostly about. As we think about the title, we also think about, as readers, the title or the subtitle helps us to make a good prediction. So if we were in reading groups right now, you would be writing your T1 in your notebook, which is good times. After we write our T1, I would ask you as readers to make a prediction in your notebook. And your prediction, you might start with, I predict, and you would tell me what you think Chapter 1 of the Boxcar Children beginning is going to be about. So right now, I want you to out loud tell me what you think Chapter 1 of the Boxcar Children is going to be about, and make your prediction as you're listening to my lesson at home, probably in your pajamas. So I want you right now to make a prediction. And if we were at school today in reading groups, after we make our prediction, we would go right into reading chapter 1. And this is one of those books that if we were in class today, that I would not be asking you to read. This is one of those books or chapters that I would actually be reading to you. So we're going to start right off with chapter 1 of the Boxcar Children beginning. I need those wide eyes and those big ears. And this is chapter 1. Now, as readers, when we're in a chapter book, you know we're going to have less pictures, more words. So you're going to have to do really, really, really good listening, because in a picture book, the pictures tell a big chunk of the story. In a chapter book, where there aren't as many pictures, or there may not be any pictures, you're having to depend on the words to tell you what's happening in the story. So here we go with chapter 1. Wide eyes, big ears.
Chapter 1. Good Times. Henry stood in the doorway of the barn and looked out over the farm. "I can smell spring," he said. His younger sister Jessie leaned her pitchfork against the barn wall and stood next to him. There had been a spring snow in the night, but she could see grass. A thin layer of snow sat on the top of the Fairmeadow Farm sign that stood in their yard. Jessie raised her head and sniffed. Henry laughed. "You look like Betty," he said. Betty was one of their 2 cows. There was also Boots, who was mostly black and sweet and silent. But it was Betty who always stretched her neck out and put her nose in the air before she mooed. Papa called Betty talkative. Jessie smiled. "It is spring," she said, "and I have my spring list." Jessie took a piece of paper and a small hammer out of her pocket. She nailed the list to the wall. Henry read over her shoulder. 1. Make barn hideaway. There was no number 2. "That's it?" asked Henry, grinning. Usually Jessie's lists were longer. "I just started," said Jessie. "What is a barn hideaway?" he asked. "I'll show you," said Jessie. "Come." Henry followed her to the ladder that went up to a loft. They climbed up. Bales of hay were stored there in neat stacks. Next to the hay was a small room with a door. The room was swept clean. There were 2 benches. There was a table with a vase with no flowers. A small round window looked out over the next farm. "A barn hideaway," said Jessie. "It is," said Henry. "Violet and Benny will like it," said Jessie. Violet can do her sewing and painting up here. We can read books to Benny. And Benny can fall out the door and down the ladder, said Henry with a small smile. We'll have to build a gate for Benny. Jessie nodded. But he'll love it, she said. Jessie frowned. I need more things for my list, she said. They heard the sound of Papa's old gray car in the driveway. Jessie and Henry climbed down the ladder and watched Papa walk up to the barn, carrying a cloth sack of nails and some boards for the stalls. Almost done? He asked them. Just have to carry water for the cows, said Jessie. Papa stood next to them. What are you looking at? Spring, said Jessie and Henry together. Their papa laughed. You're hopeful, he said. There will be another good snowstorm before it is really spring. This is March. Any news from town? Asked Jessie. Papa sighed. Bad news. People losing their jobs and houses, trying to find other places to make a living. Many people leaving. Hard times. You're lucky to have your job, said Henry. And Mama's baking for the market. Doesn't look like hard times here. I'm afraid you'll see hard times soon, Henry, said Papa. I don't want to see hard times, said Jessie. I don't want to either, said Henry. No one does. We're lucky to have paying jobs. But it means more chores for you, though, said Papa, being the oldest. And me, said Jessie. And you, Papa said. Everyone works at our house, said Jessie. And that was true. Violet, who was 10, helped with the laundry and set and cleared the table at dinner time. And Benny? Benny was just 5, and he made everyone smile. That's Benny's job, Mama had said, to brighten our days. The door to the house opened suddenly, and Violet and little Benny ran out into the snow, followed by Mama. Benny lay down in the snow, making a snow angel, and Violet started rolling spring snow for a snowman. Mama looked up at the barn and waved. Come play, called Violet to Jessie and Henry. Papa touched Henry. Go on, he said. I'll finish here. Henry and Jessie ran whooping down the hill, slipping and sliding in the snow. Watch out, called Papa. Mama has a snowball. Mama laughed. I do. In the paddock, Betty stretched out her neck and mooed loudly. Moo, called Jessie. Moo, called Henry. Moo, said Benny, pointing at Betty. Behind them, in the barn doorway, their papa smiled. It was nighttime. Henry was reading a book in bed, the lamplight falling across the pages. Henry? Jessie stood in the doorway. Henry put the book down on the bedside table. What? I'm worried about what Papa said. Hard times. Sometimes things happen we can't do anything about, said Henry. Maybe we have to find a way to do something, said Jessie. I need a longer list. I need something exciting to add to it. Maybe something will happen, Henry said. It's too peaceful here, said Jessie. Every day is like every other day. As it turned out, something would happen. Something not at all peaceful. Something Jessie and Henry could never have imagined. It would happen the very next day.
I hope you were good listeners as we listened to chapter 1 of the Boxcar Children Beginning. As we read chapter 1, you know the first chapter in a chapter book usually gives us a good introduction to our characters and our setting. And chapter 1 of the Boxcar Children Beginning did just that. So let's think about our characters and our setting. And as readers, we are going to summarize chapter 1. If we were in reading groups, we would do this in our notebooks, but we're doing it together. So I want your big eyes, wide eyes and big ears. I want you participating and reading, and we're going to read our summary of chapter 1 together. Remember, our summary tells us what the chapter was mostly about. We pick out the big things from the chapter. And we know in chapter 1 of a chapter book, we're going to get some good information about our characters and our setting for our new chapter book. So let's read our summary for chapter 1 together. Eyes with me, here we go. Papa, Mama, Henry, Jesse, Violet, and Benny have just had a spring snow in March at Fair Meadow Farm. As Jesse and Henry plan the barn hideaway, Papa warns them that hard times are coming. Now let's look at our summary. As we said, the first chapter in a chapter book usually gives us an introduction to our characters and our setting. The characters we met in chapter 1, the main characters are Papa, Mama, Henry, Jesse, Violet, and Benny. My characters tell me who the book or who the story is going to be mostly about. We also got information in chapter 1 about our setting. It said there was a spring snow. It said it was March, text to self connection. We are still in March. Today is, I think I have my dates correct. It's really hard to keep up with when we're not in school. Today is March 30th. So text to self connection, chapter 1 took place in March, and we are still in March. Second text to self is chapter 1 took place during the spring, and we are now in the spring season. And chapter 1 took place at Fair Meadow Farm. Remember, my setting tells me when and where the story takes place. When would be spring, March. Where would be Fair Meadow Farm. And then it gave me a little bit of information about what was happening or the action in chapter 1. Jesse and Henry, two of our characters, are planning a barn hideaway. Papa comes home and he gives them a big warning that hard times are coming. Hard times means Papa thinks hard times are coming for the people that live near Fair Meadow Farm and in the area close to where they live. Hard times means sometimes in life we have things that happen that make our life really, really hard. Or sometimes instead of saying really, really hard, we might say really, really different. I can make another text to self connection because right now in Greenville, Winterville, depending on where you live, right now we have all experienced some times that are very, very different. And for some of us, these times have been very, very hard because our life in the last couple of weeks in Greenville, Winterville has changed a lot. And sometimes when our life changes a lot, all of a sudden, sometimes for some of us, we think these changes are kind of good. And we may like the way things are a little bit different. And sometimes when things change for us, all of a sudden, we may think these times are very, very hard because they're so different. So I want you to be thinking about at home, I want you to be thinking about all the changes that have happened for all of us who live in Greenville and Winterville in the past couple of weeks, and how our life now is very, very different than the way it was just a couple of weeks ago. Now that is, I would say, if we were here together in class, that will be a good stopping point. That's going to be a good place for us to stop. And when we come back tomorrow, we'll do a quick review of chapter 1. And as readers, we'll be ready to move right into chapter 2. I like the way Patricia McLaughlin ended the chapter, at the end of the chapter, she let us know that things were getting ready to change. And we know, because we've talked about this a lot in first grade, you know, when she gave us clues as a writer that things were getting ready to change, that was giving us a little bit of foreshadowing. She told us things were getting ready to change, but she didn't tell us how they were getting ready to change. So this is a good stopping point. All I wanted you to do for this lesson was to be good listeners. I didn't want you to have to write anything down. Your big job when we're reading books together on the carpet, or when you're listening to me read books to you while you're at home, your big job is to listen, to participate, and when I give you little jobs to do like wide eyes, big ears, read with me, those are the things that I need you to do. So that's going to be a good stopping point for today.